I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending Friday the 13th here in November. Another week of volatility here, starting out down the limit hard there, then coming back up the limit middle of the week, and then Thursday we thought things had settled down, but then down hard again on Friday before the Fed cattle trade. But just way too much volatility. Live cattle for December contract ended Friday down 247 at 130.67, which is a loss of $3.58 for the week. Feeder cattle for November were just down 30 on Friday, but the out fronts were all down 250 to 350, but ended up closing on Friday at 175.07, which was down $6.30 for the week. CME feeder cattle index is at 181.28. I'm not sure how that's staying up there so high because the sales were all a lot lower. Real-time index on Cattle Market Central is a lot more believable at 174.30 based on a 750-pound steer. But this volatility, you know, the board can go up $3 or $4 or $6 in one day, but and then back down and this way and that way, but the cash can't do it. It can't turn on a dime. When the cash gets to going one way or the other, that's the way it's going to go for a few days. And so, hate to say it, but that's probably the way that we're going to get these levels down to where they are going to end up as we start to build supplies, and we realize it's still going to be probably 8 or 9 months before the market needs to be a lot lower, but it's probably going to get that way through these big knee-jerk reactions that just don't fully recover. But your slaughter this week was disappointing, which was also kind of a bear on the market this week. 556,000 for the week compared to 563 last week, which was pretty good, and 564 a year ago. Not keeping these cattle cleaned up. We still got some big cattle, especially up in the Corn Belt and Iowa and places, but the packers aren't really working to get through these big cattle. You know, they're mostly coming from the farmer feeders that aren't really sure when their cattle are done. Well, they've got a guy that comes by and checks on their cattle, and they tell them to keep feeding them because that's a good way to keep this market under pressure. And your commercial feedlots up in the northern plains, they know when their cattle are done and how heavy they want to make them, but they're selling their cattle on some kind of a formula, and they know when they're gonna move those cattle. Pertaining that they can get a schedule, because the packers are kind of working on them on that, even getting their cattle scheduled. But we've got winter coming now, a good storm, which the storm blew through so fast this week that really didn't have a chance to settle. But that's a lot of times supports the market, so if we start getting some storms, that could bring a little bit of support for the market. We've wrapped harvest up this year. We had a report to come in there early in the week, the WASDE report there, that was bearish for the corn and soybean markets. They were down pretty hard. Corn had been jostling around there at 375 to 380 ever since the harvest had started, but then backed off this week. And your average yield now expectations were 169.3 bushels to acre, which is pretty darn good. Soybeans are 48.3 bushels to the acre. Fats ended up selling on Friday quite a bit lower, $4 to $6 lower on a dressed, and that's where most of them sold this week, from 198 to 202. $4 lower for the most part on live sales at 126, 126 and a half. Packers wool, those farmer feeders and then smaller feeders up in Iowa, down to 123 to 125 this week, and they just keep abusing those guys. Really didn't have any Southern Plains trade. Of course, they haven't been selling enough on a negotiated basis to really establish a market, but we're not sure what that market would be. Feeder cattle sales this week, calves, which is the bulk of the trade right now, were $10 to mostly $20 lower, spots $30 lower. Most places didn't have enough true yearlings to get a market test, but the places that did have them are mostly backgrounded cattle, $5 to $15 lower in a light test. Look at Cattle Market Central in Lexington, Nebraska on Friday. They had a load of steers weighed 702, probably big calves, but that's the kind of cattle they feed up there. I'm sure they weren't close to a year old, but be awful good cattle there on Friday, weighing 702 at 189 and a quarter. Look at some lighter calves in Lexington on Friday. They had a half a load of good steers weighed 550 at 221, so still a pretty good market on those 5 weight calves, and that wasn't just at 500 pounds. That's 5.5 at 221. Check out DV Auction this week. I got a Show Me Select heifer sale coming up on Friday at 7 p.m. They've got around 300 head, and those Show Me Select heifers have awful good reputation. They've got low thresholds for calving ease, and then they're sure the right kind if you want to get in the market. That's all for this week. We'll talk to you on Wednesday.